So the critical care consult, let's just say this was, for me, this was the toughest interview I've ever had, because I knew I wanted to go in the Air Force. This is something that I've always wanted for myself. And I remember at the time beating myself up because I didn't know the answers to the questions they were asking. And today I'm going to give you some of those pearls for you to be able to ace this critical care consult interview. What's really good on my day ones? Welcome back to the channel. So you want to go critical care route, huh? Let's just say you already did your chief nurse interview. Now you're preparing for this interview. Fact, I actually had to do this interview before the chief nurse interview because there was no way of fitting these in. So like it kind of threw me off. The reason why they have you do the chief nurse interview first is to kind of break you in, and then they do the harder interview after. This is a nerve-wracking interview. And I say this from experience because you need to score a certain amount of points for them to consider you to go into this field. And the amount of people I've spoken to need to score above an 8. And I've spoken to one person who said they scored a 7.5. And what do they do in this situation? But that'll probably call for a different video, but you need to score high. And I'm going to prepare you for that. So pay attention, take notes, and let's go. So it's very important for you to come in with at least, I want to say, 2 years experience. If you have one, then that's good too. You're just going to start off at a lower rank. One of the first questions that they will ask you is, please provide a medication that is weight-based that they use in your hospital. For me, I used the drug milrinone, mics per kgs per minute. Again, I had barely any time to prepare for this interview, and it threw me off guard because, of course, drug calculation is something you should know, but at the top of my head, I did not know how to calculate for the life of me. I politely told him I do not know how to calculate this med. He gave me the calculations and I still calculated it wrong. That's the first thing that made me feel like I wasn't going to get this position. Some of the other questions that they're going to talk to is basically multi-systems. You need to know your vent settings. I remember he was asking me about, what is the most basic vent settings for a patient who comes out intubated, and I told him VCAC. And how the interview works is you give them an answer and then they will expound on it. Regarding VCAC, he gave me a set of ABGs and he gave me respiratory acidosis. What he wanted to know was how to fix that. So the answer is increase your respiratory rate to blow off more CO2. So that was my answer and I stick to it. Let's say you are a cardiac nurse. He's looking at your resume and he's asking you questions as to how to fix cardiogenic shock. For me, I answered, for cardiogenic shock, you would give volume and start dobutamine. And the reasoning for that is you would start dobutamine because it is cardiac selective, and it is the drug of choice for cardiogenic shock. The volume is there to help with preload, and the dobutamine is there to help with afterload. Basically, your hemodynamics, CRAP, contractility, rate, afterload, preload. And he goes into EKG, gives you, let's say, he asks you which part of the heart is affected if leads blank, blank, blank is affected. For me, he asked leads 2-3 AVF. And I told him infralateral infarction. I went as far as explaining that if dobutamine did not help, then the patient may need something like a balloon pump. And if the balloon pump isn't warranted, patient may need ECMO. Then they'll go into other things like what would you do in certain circumstances with family members. And then we'll basically open the floor for questions. I mean, that's the thing, is knowing what interventions need to be done in certain circumstances. Anticipation of intervention. That is the most important thing as a critical care nurse, is knowing what to do in certain circumstances. And by putting you into that situation, they want to know what your thought process is and basically understand what needs to be done to save a patient's life. This is the type of interview where they ask you situational questions and how to react to it. So it is very important to have some kind of background with what you're doing, especially if it's general ICU, neuro ICU, trauma ICU, cardiovascular ICU. That's why they prefer nurses with at least 2 years of experience before going into this field. And yeah, so some things to do to prepare for this is to know how to calculate mics per kgs per minute, or mics per kgs per hour, depending on the med. You need to know how to do drug calculations. Know your vent settings and how to control it. Medications that control certain situations like cardiogenic shock, sedation, pain, etc. Another thing that you could do to prepare for this is knowing how to mitigate certain circumstances that warrant other interventions. Like, for example, if you knew the patient is having MI, you'd have to prep the patient for, a cath and possibly future interventions, IR, etc., etc. Another thing would be to know your normal values. Remember him asking me about hemodynamic parameters and knowing that the normal for cardiac index is above a 2, and knowing how to treat. So everything is knowing how to treat and anticipate, and the critical care consult wants to know that. So ask questions. I stressed that on the chief nurse interview video. If you haven't seen that, check that out, by the way. You need to know how to converse with some of your colleagues. This is very important because the critical care consult makes the decision on whether or not you get in. And the better your answers, the more likely you are to score high. So yeah, I leave this information with you and what you want to do. I actually have a sheet that I typed everything out. If you want that sheet, let me know. My email is down below. You can reach out to me there. But besides that, I hope you guys are doing great. I'll see you guys next video. Y'all take care. And don't forget to thumbs up this video up if it helped you out. And don't forget to check out my other videos. Y'all take care, and I'll see you guys next video.